There's a big education gap currently evolving in crypto, and I feel like the education gap is growing larger and larger. Just take Democrats in Congress, for instance. They keep voting no, right? When we're talking about putting crypto on the main stage in America, I mean, we just had an election where hundreds of people that were pro crypto got elected and hundreds of people that were against crypto didn't win. We understand that Americans want this technology. I think it is an age gap with people 65 or older in Congress not understanding how important this technology is to everybody. And if the world is moving so quickly towards crypto adoption, what are we doing here in the United States? I don't know. I can't answer that. Like, is it a negotiation thing with Democrats, or is it they just don't have a clue? I'll let me know down in the comments what you think it is. Really quickly, the IBIT shares ETF for Bitcoin, the biggest, most popular ETF, I think of all kind, like the fastest growing, $115 billion in just the Blackrock ETF. Kind of crazy stuff. A lot of value flowing through, and Blackrock is continuing to buy. What happens when you apply the same type of pressure on an XRP ETF, right? Are we going to stay at $2? Or is it going to be $5? Or is it going to be $10? As more and more XRP becomes less available on the market, does the price start cascading even higher? Like, I don't know. See, they offer it to ultra high net individuals first, and then they roll it out to everybody else, right? But we understand that BlackRock, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, all of these big investment, groups, institutions are jumping full in on crypto. Let's go ahead and this is another clip from Robbie Mitchnick, ex-Ripple employee, head of digital assets at BlackRock. Let me go ahead and play this.
Most people recognize that out of all the developments in the blockchain and digital assets ecosystem, DeFi is potentially the most transformative, right? It's also in some ways the furthest afield from being able to kind of have widespread adoption. But unlike, in the early days, permission blockchain use case here or crypto here, there's not one institution in finance who doesn't have some path to being disrupted by DeFi, right? So everything else has been a mix of kind of opportunities and maybe threats. DeFi forces everyone to say, what does this mean for us if this actually happens? So everybody's paying attention. You're just not at the point yet where you've got kind of banks and asset managers.
Yeah. We're getting to that point very quickly here. Regulation will play a vital role in all of that, but getting all of the regulators like the OCC, the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, the CFTC, the SEC, all on the same page, that has been the hardest challenge in the United States. And I think the Trump administration has done a good job about getting the right people in these right positions. I would just like to see more done to support U.S. companies. I know when this is all started, it was told to us that they were going to concentrate on American cryptos, and that has since turned into, let's just focus on Bitcoin, which I don't think is really going to help out anybody but a few, select people that bought Bitcoin, 10 years ago, right? I mean, anyone that owns Bitcoin today, not many people can afford one whole Bitcoin. Another clip.
Financial institutions' efforts on private blockchains in the past, and maybe sort of the shift to public blockchains, the regulatory political temperature that has kind of been changing in recent years to kind of lead to that.
Yeah, well, I think the verdict is in on the private blockchains, and it's not good. That was obviously where a lot of the TradFi exploration in this space occurred in the early years. In particular, that was really all of the banks and some of the other TradFi institutions had comfort with. But the track record is what it is, and it reflects the fact that there's been very, very de minimis actual adoption in an economic, commercial way at scale of any of these private blockchain projects. And I think, in hindsight, at least, that makes sense in terms of the curbing of the value prop of blockchain's potential that a private blockchain represents. And so Public blockchains are increasingly the focus, even for TradFi firms. Maybe not all yet, but certainly that's the direction of travel. And we've seen obviously encouraging regulatory guidance over the last couple of weeks that help support the notion that this is now suitable territory for even banks in the U.S. to engage in.
Listen, that was really interesting to hear that private blockchains are not the focus right now when it comes to these bigger institutions. And when we're trying to talk about public blockchains versus private blockchains, I wanted to make it a whole lot easier for you. So I looked up, give me a list of the most popular private blockchains versus the most popular public blockchains. And this is what was found. So we've heard that R3 Corda has been having a very difficult time getting customers that are paying and using their software. That is why Corda has, been having to let some people go. And, they're looking at maybe chopping up R3 Corda and selling it in pieces. That has been their demise. You look at IBM having their own Hyperledger Fabric. And then you talk about Quorum. You talk about Hyperledger Sawtooth. Sawtooth? That's a dope name. And then Taurus and OpenChain. I've never even heard of these two. But then when we're talking about the most popular public chains, you got Ethereum, Bitcoin, BNB, Solana, Cardano, Polkadot, Avalanche, Stellar, Tezos, Cosmos, of course, the XRP Ledger. Interesting to see what it kind of came up with and what it popped up here. But I hope that was valuable information. There's also this clip that everybody's seen. Don't go anywhere because I have a ton of other stuff. Brad Garlinghouse. I got some more Robbie Mitchnick stuff, and I got some interesting connections to Ripple that you have to see. So let's play this so we understand the head of Blackrock. He's telling us where this is going. I play this clip a lot, but it's going to speak to a larger thing of what we're talking about here. Blackrock understands the evolution of digital assets and tokenization. They want to be one of the biggest players. They are going to be one of the biggest players. And, if a partnership is announced with Ripple of some kind, imagine what that could do to the XRP price. Let's play this. Changes the whole ecosystem. If you ask me today where I think most of this value is going to wind up, I will give you a few guesses. All right. My educated guess that you're going to see a lot of this value on HBAR, Algorand, the XRP Ledger, Stellar, Ondo. I think those are going to be some key players when it comes to this whole tokenization effort. And there's also going to be a ton of other players that come along for the ride, but these are just the ones that stand out when I'm talking about this. And then you have Brad Garlinghouse hints, hints at a connection. Let me just play this for you.
So you would welcome an XRP ETF then?
We would certainly welcome it, and I think it's inevitable that there'll be, multiple ETFs around different tokens. And I think you'll even see ETFs potentially around baskets that also, I think, further diversify that risk.
Are you in talks with the largest issuers, particularly BlackRock, to get this done?
Well, I'm not going to comment on that. I know BlackRock has said some things publicly. We think it makes sense for the XRP community overall. Ripple obviously is a very important stakeholder in the XRP ecosystem, but we're not the only player. And look, we've seen, before the SEC lawsuit, XRP was the second most valuable digital asset. I think because of the headwinds of that lawsuit, we've now seen that largely abate. But the long-term view on these things is about, how do you create utility and really solve real world problems with these different digital assets?
And I think we've seen that over the past few months, more and more utility as clarity has been shown for the XRP Ledger and XRP as a token. You're starting to see different companies starting to move forward with their own strategic reserves. Now, I want you to understand this. Every small business, every institution like business, every bank, every credit union, they are also going to want to get some type of strategic reserve here. It's not going to be like 100% all at once, but as more and more companies start to do this, it will become more of the norm. As more digital assets are needed to support all of these different digital asset strategies, this is going to put when there's so much demand, so much pent up demand, when you actually get clarity, when you actually get regulation where people know it's safe to participate in the ecosystem, that will be a big changing point in the days to come. And I think that is going to be extremely powerful once we get to that point. We're not there quite yet, but if Congress can get their shit together, crypto regulation that makes sense for both sides, that is going to be very, very impactful. All right, here's another clip, 37 seconds, Robbie Mitchnick, and then we're going to end here with a few other things that I have. All right. And then, when you look at Hidden Road, Ripple, Hidden Road, BlackRock, integrated into Coinbase International, OKX, Deribit, Bitfinex, Bullish, AsiaNext, and Six Digital Exchange, which is Sweden's, I believe, digital exchange for different assets. And then you have Michael Higgins, Hidden Road's global head of business development, highlighted the significance of using BlackRock's Buildle tokens as collateral. And you start to wonder, right? What are these different connections that Ripple has already to BlackRock? And BlackRock understands how important XRP is going to be to the new financial system. I think they were just waiting to get their ducks in a row. I think they are waiting for people inside of BlackRock, their customers, to start asking for these products. If you are at BlackRock or any of these institutions that haven't yet applied for an XRP ETF, it is on you to go ask them when they are going to do it. If you, right, can put pressure, not pressure, but if you can let them know that you're interested in this product, you might not be the only person that's calling. And if enough people start to call and ask for a certain item, they're going to go ahead and get that item, because they know if they don't, you might go somewhere else with your money. And that's exactly what they're trying to avoid. And then you also have Ripple XRP, Goldman Sachs, ex-Goldman Sachs employee, is now the sales director at Ripple. So you have a lot of commingling of these big financial institutions. I also wanted to bring up, what are the connections that Perplexity was able to find with Ripple and BlackRock. It says potential XRP ETF collaboration. We've talked about that at length. I don't need to get into that anymore. Market impact and institutional legitimacy. BlackRock's involvement is seen as a potential game changer that could drive mainstream adoption of XRP, increase liquidity, and attract institutional investors. Absolutely. The precedent sets by BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin Trust, the IBIT, saw over 39 billion in inflows, is cited as an example of transformative impact. How much in total? How much? I thought it was like a lot more. How much in total has gone into Bitcoin ETF and BlackRock? A Bitcoin ETF. I thought it was like over 100 billion. Let's go ahead and have that. Once that pulls up here, let me scroll up here while that's pulling it up. Also, legal and regulatory developments. We're waiting for clarity from the government, which, it doesn't seem like it's going to come anytime soon, which is very, very frustrating. And of course, tokenization, asset management. There's only so many of these blockchains that are going to be trusted and used by these institutions. We know XRP Ledger is one of the most widely tested by financial institutions and banks on the planet. When we're talking about ETFs on Bitcoin, here you go. Approximately $120 billion has been put into the Bitcoin ETF. Imagine getting $100 billion going into the XRP ETF. If we start talking about a market cap multiplier, if we can do a 25 or 50x multiplier on $100 billion, you're talking about trillions of dollars in market cap coming to the XRP ledger through an ETF. Imagine if you get the ETF and legal clarity and all of this stuff going at the same time. It's going to be game changing. All right, guys, I'll see you next time. If you like the video, please like it, please share. Have a good weekend. Aloha.